Welcome to the Dare to Begin Small and Mighty podcast, episode number 65. We're doing a throwback this week to an episode that was highly downloaded and I think will be super valuable for you. Let's get into it. I spent years building my interior design business trying to do all the things. The marketing, the networking, the free content, spending thousands of dollars on training and education, only to see minimal growth. After years of frustration, I finally started to ask, what am I missing? I had the systems in place for powerful growth. I had amazing clients. I had determination, drive, and commitment to spare. And yet, I wasn't seeing the success I desired. What if business is not about the doing? What if building a powerful business requires both powerful systems and something else, something deeper? I'm Amy Van Meel, and I'm on a journey to discover that something else. If you are ready to build a powerful business and do it knowing that your success is inevitable, join me as I share both the powerful systems I know work and my lessons and revelations as I discover that something deeper. Welcome, Changemaker, to the Dare to Begin Small and Mighty podcast. Well, hey there, Changemakers. Thanks so much for joining me this week. Welcome to the Dare to Begin Small and Mighty podcast. It's me here, Amy. I'm happy to have you here with me today. So I'm actually doing something a little bit different, something I have not yet done, and it might sound a little echoey because I didn't put my sound baffles up today. What I'm actually doing for this week's podcast is bringing back an episode from a few months ago, an episode that is one of the more highly downloaded episodes of my podcast. And I think it's a perfect podcast episode for you at this time. It's all about when I started my business. So I share in the podcast episode a few of the key lessons that I had in the first 5 years that I had my business. Now, this would be my design business. I talk about my numbers honestly. Right before I had recorded this podcast originally, I had shared some numbers in my business, or from my business, about when I first started, and it scared the crap out of me to do it, but I thought it was really important to share that. I wanted to really bring some transparency to what it can be like to start a business. I talk about how I limited my success and the decision to choose fear instead of moving forward, and why it's so important to let go of the big number of success, right? Like we have this idea of how much we want to earn or want to see or what have you, and letting that go. I'm bringing that forward this week because I think it's really important for all of us, wherever we are right now in our businesses. There are a phenomenal amount of people that are using this opportunity where we're at home. We're doing our own thing. We may not be going to our regular 9-to-5 job, that you can start your business. You can finally start moving forward on it. And I 100% support it. I am so excited when people, dare to dream bigger and they want to go forward and finally action on these big thoughts and plans that they have. But I do think that in many, many, many streams, social media, some big influencers, business coaches, a whole range of people, that there is a huge disservice being shared and told and taught to new and aspiring entrepreneurs, where it's all about the hustle. It's all about, if you're not making money, you're just not working hard enough, all kinds of things. So I want to share the experience of when I started my business, and my design business has done, I think, pretty well. Basically, the entire time I've had my design business, this is kind of blowing my mind, guys, but the entire time I've had my design business, the city I live in, so the city that I serve with my design business, has been in recession. So it's done very well considering I didn't know anybody when I started here. And I think that you can learn a lot from this episode. So enjoy this throwback for this week, and I trust you'll get a phenomenal amount of value out of it. I believe in the episode there's some talk about a launch. Obviously, that has passed, but I wanted to leave it in its raw form for you without having to chop it up and edit certain things out. So I hope you enjoy it, and thank you so much for listening. Well, hey there, podcast listeners. I'm so excited that you're here with me today. I trust that you got last week's episode where I interviewed the beautiful, talented, super successful Paige Cole. I call her the money manifestation magnet. If you haven't listened to it yet, I definitely encourage you go have a listen after you listen to today's episode. So, today's episode is an inspired action episode. Now, some of you know, if you've been listening on the regular, that I have been in a deep personal growth cycle probably the last like 8 or 9 months. And it's been really ramped up the last month and a half, 2 months. It's been a really amazing process. It's been scary. It's been terrifying. It's been disheartening. It's had lots of tears. It's had lots of joys and celebrations. And I would encourage you to, at some point in your life, whether you've gone through it already or you may be entering into it, or maybe you haven't yet and you know maybe it's coming, to fully step into a personal growth cycle. Now, personal growth cycle is really, for me, I'll share what it is for me. For me, this personal growth cycle it's kind of like, you could think about it like a midlife crisis in a way. Basically, what I have spent the last 8, 9 months doing is really questioning and digging into everything that I believe, the way that I think about things, the way that I approach things, as well as trying to understand why my reality is the way it is. Now, I know I've talked about this in a previous podcast, that we are the creator of our own reality. And so I'm fully aware that my current reality has been created by myself. I know that I had an active role in it all the way through. And so this past 8, 9 months has really been me going, okay, I know that I'm a co-creator. I understand that where I am now is because of what I have been putting out or thinking about or believing about into the world. And so if I want something different, then I need to actually look into the eye a lot of these things. So if you follow me on the Instagrams, then last week I trust that you will have seen the post where I actually share my numbers. And that's really what inspired today's podcast episode. So what I want to share with you today is really the ups and downs of a new business. I'm going to talk with you about these numbers and some celebration moments. But what I want to highlight here is this scares the crap out of me. And I'm not sharing this because I'm like, okay, this whole idea of being authentic means showing all my vulnerabilities. I don't think that being, air quotes, vulnerable for vulnerability's sake is to anybody's benefit. But if you've been following this podcast for a while, then you know that I do my best to show up in the real for you, to give you an insight into what I'm going and growing through, because I believe that I know I'm not the only one who has doubts and fears and second guesses and third guesses and fourth guesses their decisions and the risks that we're taking. And so I believe that in sharing this with you, that will help you as well. And maybe it's just something that you put in your pocket for future. Maybe your growth cycle is coming, and in 6 months or 2 years or 5 years, you'll be in it and you'll go, oh, you know what? I remember I heard somebody talking about this once. And so I can step into this fully. So that is really my desire for you, is to be able to take this, and I trust that it'll meet you where you are now. And I also trust and believe that it will be to your benefit in the future. So let's talk about the ups and downs of a new business. Now, I want to share a story with you before I go into the numbers, because I think this will help you understand a bit better why I have such fear around these numbers, why I've really been in denial of these numbers. And you might be going, Amy, didn't you talk early on in the podcast about claiming your numbers and knowing your numbers and really, taking ownership of them? Yeah, I did. I totally did. And you totally got me. You're absolutely right. I did talk about that. And I knew I had a pretty good idea of my numbers, but because they weren't what I wanted and they weren't what I believed to be this, flagship marker of success, my design business is by no means an overnight success. This new business, Dare to Begin, is by no means an overnight success. So there's been a lot of ups and downs. And the story that I want to share with you today is actually early on in my design business. So very early on, when I started my design business, I had like no business experience whatsoever. I had done some, I'd sort of played around with the idea of having my own business. I had done design consultations on the side when I had different jobs. And so I understood the basics, like the very, very basics. I always paid close attention to what owners and managers did in the jobs that I had, particularly if it was a smaller business. So if it was like family run or something, so that I could actually see the high level structure and kind of get a sense of the day to day. I always paid attention to that. I always looked at it as an observation point of like, okay, what are they doing that works? What are they doing that I don't like, that I would do differently? That kind of thing. So when I started the design business, I had no business training whatsoever. So my education is in the creative side, and that's it. Like when I did my undergrad, I have a very good undergrad degree from University of Manitoba. It's a highly respected architecture program and design program, but the program doesn't talk at all about business. So I knew I had, like I said, I had a basic idea of what it was going to be, and that was about it. So shortly after I decided to go forward on this, I was introduced to a person who offered a 2-year business training program. It was a live training program, sounded fantastic. I'm like, okay, let's do it. And part of this program included bi-weekly, I'll call them accountability meetings they were always local. So every 2 weeks we'd meet locally with the local entrepreneurs that were also part of this program. And the intention was to gain insight and understanding from other entrepreneurs, to learn. There was a leader to the program. So every week, there was a person at the front that this is the lesson that we're talking about. And there was a specific format to these meetings. And one of the things that was part of the meeting was let me say two things. So one of the things was to set a goal, because they always talk about if it's not measurable, it's not real. So we needed to set a financial, like an income goal for our business. And the other thing was that we had every week we'd have these moments to share the wins. So whatever the win was, the floor would be open. You could share the win. So when I started, like I said, I had barely started my business. So I think I had one client. Like I had nothing at the time other than a drive and determination to make it work. So when it came to setting the income goal, I didn't have any historical data on which to set it. So I followed the instructions and said, you know what? Set a bigger goal than maybe you think is possible right now, because it's better to set a bigger goal and miss it than set a smaller goal and get it, right? And basically limit yourself. So set a bigger goal and then we'll work towards getting that goal. So fine, away we go. So months and months, I'm in this program, I'm doing the learning, and I'm not meeting these goals. And I'm feeling a little bit, I'm feeling down about it. I'm a girl who likes to meet the targets. So to be consistently not meeting the targets doesn't feel so great for me. Then came the day that I came within $100 of my goal. I was so freaking excited. I was calculating the numbers the night before the meeting and I was so pumped. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm within $100. I had never been that close. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to share the win in the group. I couldn't wait to celebrate. And I was really just pumped and excited for what was to come. So the meeting comes the next day. We're in the meeting and like the moment opens when the floor opens and I practically jump out of my chair that I wanted to share this amazing news. And everybody in the group knew me. Most people knew me. I had done a lot of volunteer work for the owner, so they knew me from volunteering at the live events. I often did. If the admin person in the morning wasn't available, I would fill in and help with the admin stuff. So a lot of the students, a lot of my fellow entrepreneurs in this program knew who I was, and they understood to a degree, where I was in my business and that kind of thing. So I stood up to share, was so excited. The owner of the company happened to be there that day. He wasn't there all the time, but he happened to be there that day. And a little bit later in the meeting, I'm feeling so good about sharing this win. I'm so freaking excited. And a little bit later in the meeting, he comes and he stands behind my chair. And I don't think I'll ever forget this. He stands behind my chair and he says, I would never, ever miss a goal. I would make sure that I get it. There would be absolutely no reason for me to miss a goal, and I definitely would not be celebrating the fact that I came within $100. I would find a way to make that $100, and we need to stop celebrating these, the lack of accomplishment. We need to celebrate when we actually do it. You guys need to push through and da 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 da. At some point I blanked out. I was on the far side of the room. So this person, they came all the way to the far side of the room specifically to stand behind my chair. And my guess is that the owner thought that I would be okay with being used as an example. That I think they thought that I'm strong enough, I'm confident enough that this would be okay, and let's use this as a teaching moment for the rest of the group. Here's what was actually going on in my head. I wish that the floor would have opened up and swallowed me whole. I didn't want to be in the room. It was everything that it took in me to be able to keep my composure and hold myself through the rest of the meeting, and I couldn't get out of the room fast enough afterwards. I barely made it to the car before I burst into sobs, and I have no idea how I made it home because I was so upset, but I had to get out of there. Thankfully, the meeting was only 10 minutes from my house, so it wasn't like I was driving very far. I was destroyed in that moment. And during this whole growth cycle, I realized just about 2 weeks ago, all of a sudden, with this blinding clarity, this is the beautiful thing about being in a personal growth cycle, is that when you start to open up and question things that have come before, happened before, all of a sudden you can start to see the threads that they have through years of your life and through all avenues of your actions and things that you've done. And I was feeling super distraught. I had come to the point where I felt like I needed to really own the numbers in my business. The universe had been continually coming up to me. You need to own your numbers. You need to own your numbers. And so finally, with I'll be honest, there was quite a bit of fear in me to actually run the profit loss reports from my business in the last 5 years. I did. I ran the reports, and as I looked at the numbers, and I had some idea of the numbers, but again, I hadn't really looked them in the eye. I was so distraught. I was so upset. I was just it just knocked me off my chair for the whole rest of the afternoon, for the next, I would say the next hour. So I have 2 chairs in my office. I have a tiny office, but I have 2 chairs. I have my desk chair that sits in front of my computer, which is what I'm sitting on talking to you here in the podcast. And then I have a chair in the corner, which is my reflection chair. It's where I sit to do my meditation. It's where I sit to do, if I'm going to do some reading, whether it's research, if I can research something on my iPad versus on my computer, or I'm reading a book, that's where I'll sit. So the perspectives in my office are totally different because they actually face different directions. And as I was sitting in my reflection chair, I was face to face with my annual calendar. And I realized that I bought an annual calendar in May, and I wrote dollar amounts that I wanted to achieve every month. So in June, it was this much. In July, it was this much. August, et cetera, et cetera. All the way through, I had written these dollar amounts of what I wanted to achieve. And I'm feeling really down about my numbers. I'm feeling down about the reality of my bank account at this moment. And, there's everything around my numbers at this moment was feeling really down and depressed. And as I looked at July, and I looked at the amount that I had put on there, and in wanting to be clear with you guys, wanting to be honest with you, I will tell you honestly, the number I had written for July was $1,000. And I looked at that $1,000 in July, and I go, I think I might have made $1,000 in July. I'm going to check my invoices. So sure enough, I checked my invoices. I had made $1,182.50, not including taxes. So I'm like, oh, okay, I actually reached my number for July. Well, I wonder what I did in June. June also was $1,000 on the calendar. So I go back into my invoices in June. In June, I had brought in $5,030 before taxes. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting in my chair and I'm looking at this and I'm like, you've got to be shitting me right now. So here I am feeling horrible about myself, feeling like I'm a complete failure in every way, shape, or form, feeling like nothing I ever want comes to fruition. And yet, not only have I manifested exactly what I put on the calendar, I've actually manifested it in abundance. It's been more. But the problem is, I've been asking for something too small. And in that moment, I was checking in with my coach. And in that moment, as I was checking in with her, I remembered this event that happened at this business training. And I suddenly saw across all the years, because that happened about 4 years ago, I would say. I saw across the 4 years how that one event altered everything that went forward. From that moment forward, in my mind, I formed this belief in that moment that it was never good enough. Even if I came close to a goal, it was never good enough. So why set myself up for failure? Why don't I just make smaller and smaller goals? Which is exactly what I've been doing. And one of the reasons why I've been, I think, terrified of really claiming my numbers and owning my numbers and talking honestly about them is this belief that, you don't want to talk about this. I don't want people to know. I don't want to have a repeat of this situation where I'm in front of 100 of my peers and someone calls me out for not doing good enough or not operating it the way they would, right? Who wants to have that again? I sure as heck don't want to have that again. And the other thing that I think what came up is these numbers, they meant something to me. So I assigned a meaning to these numbers. Now, here's what was really interesting to me. Literally the next day, so I printed off these profit and loss reports, went through this whole thing in the afternoon, like going through, it was a crazy afternoon of just like revelations and understanding and clarification. And the very next day, I had an interview booked for another podcast. It's brand new and I believe it's called Deep Talks. I'm waiting to find out, the actual release, but I believe it's going to be released in September. And the reason that they asked if I would be part of their podcast was to talk about the idea of bootstrapping your business. And their focus was saying, there's so much information out in the world about getting venture capitalists like VCs to help launch your business or to get funding of some variety. But there's very little to almost no information about bootstrapping a business. And bootstrapping means you're funding it yourself. There ain't nobody giving you, $10,000 or $100,000 or $500,000 to start. Bootstrapping is not going to the bank and getting a loan to get started. Bootstrapping is every freaking dollar that shows up in your business comes from you. Comes from your bank account, comes from your savings account, comes from however it is that you generate it. Maybe it's a job, what have you, but it comes from you. You are putting 100% of the money into the business. That's how I've built both my businesses. So both my design business and now this new one, Dare to Begin, are both bootstrap businesses. So I understand the bootstrapping inside and out and backwards. So I have printed off these numbers. I still have these profit and loss reports on my desk. And I knew deep within me that I was being called to own these numbers. That it was important that I actually showed up for you, for me, for, the highest good of all, to really own these numbers. And wouldn't you know, in the podcast, the podcast interviewer actually asked if I knew my specific numbers. Now, I wasn't prepared in advance for what we were going to talk about, so I didn't know what the questions were that the interviewer wanted to ask. So when this came up, I kind of chuckled. There was a brief moment of like, oh my gosh, this is the moment where I'm going to share it. And yet there was also a moment of going like, okay, I knew this was coming. I knew the universe was calling me up to own my numbers and to share them openly. And here it is. Here's the moment. Now, the podcast doesn't release until September, so you might be wondering why I'm sharing them today. So I had the interview on the Friday. The following week on Wednesday is when I interviewed Paige Cole, which was last week's podcast episode. And Paige Cole, if you listened to her already, she's the money manifestation mama. She just does like crazy good things. And I love her Instagram feed and I'm part of her Facebook group. And I think she's a total boss babe. I completely admire and respect her. And she openly talks about her numbers in her business. We talked about that in the podcast. So I asked her why she openly talks about it. And her answer really fascinated me. This idea of bringing clarity and honesty around what actually happens. So I want you to go have a listen to the podcast. I'm not going to talk about any further there, but in having that interview with her, in having this whole, like, it's just been, when all the things start to click together and you're like, oh my gosh, all these things are becoming one thing. That's what was happening. And I knew all of a sudden in that moment, I needed to talk about my numbers. So it inspired in that moment my Instagram post. And again, if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go find it at I Dare to Begin. where it's a post that I actually show you, I talk about my numbers. I show you the actual profit or loss that I made each year in business. And I had been beating myself up about these numbers. I had been telling myself I was a total failure, that I, wasn't a good business person, that I wasn't smart with money, that I wasn't worthy, that I wasn't smart enough or good enough or whatever. All these really bullshit reasons that I've been putting into my mind that I wasn't successful enough. And so one of the big things that I have been wrestling with in launching Dare to Begin, in putting out the programs like Lost to Launched Academy, like the Profit Power Pack, is wrestling with this idea of, even though I know these processes work, I'm fearful that someone's going to finally have a look at the numbers of my business and go, "Well, who do you think you are to teach people this stuff?" Right? Like, you don't have the stellar business. You want to make more money. Why do you think that it's okay for you to talk to somebody else when you haven't created the money that you wanted? And so as I began to really go through these numbers, and my Instagram post talks about it a bit more in depth, what I wanted to look at was what was happening in each of those years. What was going on behind the scenes? Because this is what has been a recurring thought in my mind the last 9 months, as I've been thinking about Lost to Launched Academy, as I've been thinking about the programs that I put together for my coming students. I have yet to have the students come, but they're going to come. I know they're going to come. And one of the things that I have been wrestling with is this idea of like, well, who am I? Why, if I don't have the results, how can I tell them what's going on? So I began to get really curious about my numbers, began to get really curious about, less so about like the actual dollar amount and more about what was happening at that time. In that year, what was going on? What was going on in the year before it? Because things like there's a time delay, right? When you have something going on, there's a time delay for whatever that is to show up in your life. So I wanted to now have a look at, okay, so if in 2016, I turned a profit of nearly $4,000, what was happening in 2016 and what was happening in 2015? And then what was happening in 2017, and starting to follow it all out. And what I found was really surprising to me. So you're probably going to hear me turning over my piece of paper here in the background. So in 2015, I started my business in November of 2014. So basically my first year is roughly 14 months. And so we'll call it 2015. I had a loss. I operated at a loss in my first year of $4,300. Now here's the thing. As I was beginning to do this reflection, this is what I realized. When I started my business, I've talked about this before, literally like the same week or within a couple of weeks of when I actually started my business, oil crashed, and I'm in Calgary, where oil is a huge factor in our local industry. So here I am starting a brand new business in what really could be looked at as a luxury industry, right? Interior design is not a necessity, it's more of a luxury. And I'm watching people getting laid off all over the place. Our friend group, we have friends that are in a variety of different industries. I would say about half of our friend group got laid off or downgraded in their jobs. So and not just once, but like some of them multiple times. And it had nothing to do with whether they were good at their jobs or anything, but just the economy couldn't support all of a sudden all these jobs, because we had gone from having a really robust and wealthy oil industry to now really struggling. And so all these people are getting laid off. So that was a huge thing. In my first year, that's when I engaged that business training. So that was a $12,000 program, which I paid for over 2 years. But that, again, is a significant amount of money. So we're talking $6,000 in a year for business training. In my first year of business, I still can't believe that this happened in some ways, and I've talked about this before as well, that I had a client that refused to pay his bill, and so I ended up in front of a judge. I had to file a civil suit to get paid. That job ended up operating at a loss. I barely got my money out, and that was a huge, not just like a financial hit, but emotionally, that was an enormous thing that happened in my life. I had a lot of expenses when I started my business, right? I didn't have I had a MacBook Pro from university that was really needing to be retired. It still actually operates. I will say this, it still actually operates. But in my first year, I bought an iMac so that I had something, a computer that I could actually, design things on. I needed to buy software systems to do the design work, that kind of thing. I needed to get a website up and going. So there's costs to website platforms, business cards, networking events. There's a lot of expenses around getting started. But I also, in that first year, developed my profit strategy. And even though it came later in my first year, here's how it goes forward. So 2015, I operated at a $4,300 loss. 2016, I turned a $3,970 profit. Now that may not seem like a lot, but think about it. Basically, almost the exact amount that I operated at a loss, I now operated at a profit in 2016. And that was the year that I put that profit strategy into play full time. Now, all of my clients were taking up this new process that I had developed. And it's that strategy that I teach you in the Profit Power Pack. So that was a big one. That was also the first major referral project that I got in that year, 2016. I had a wonderful, my very first client actually referred me for a project that was my first big referral project. So that happened that year. I also developed my referral program in 2016. So now I was rewarding people for referring me forward, right? So these things were coming into play in 2016. In 2017, I turned a loss of $6,350. Now, what happened in 2017? I engaged a life coach. I had a lot going on in my personal life that I was really struggling with. I'd been cycling down. I had been a lot of these struggles. Now, remember, I had that incident with the business training that was petering across all avenues of my life. So the idea, when I talk about mindset and the power of owning your mindset and really stepping into creating the future that you want, this is why, because I see how it affected my business all the way through. So I engaged a life coach for I think it was a 6-month program. That was a significant financial investment. I also collaborated on a book. So I became an international bestseller on Amazon for this book. And it cost me an investment to get into that book. And that book it's called I Am a Brilliant Woman, Volume 2. Sorry, I just turned around to have a double check on my shelf. I Am a Brilliant Woman, Volume 2. You can find it on Amazon if you're interested. In 2017, I also bought my Subaru. You guys know how much I love my Subaru. So that was a huge financial investment for me and an enormous financial win. In truth, there's, of all the payments that come out of my account every month, even though I feel sometimes a little bit of stress around how am I going to make that payment, it's one payment that I never, ever, ever look at and be like, I just wish I didn't have to pay that. Now, I'll be totally honest, my insurance payments, I do feel that way. I'm just like, I just feel like I'm just lining the pockets of these insurance companies because you need insurance and ideally you're not using it, but at the same time, it kind of feels like you're just giving money away. But my car payment never feels bad to me because I always love to then, all I have to do literally is walk into the garage, look at my car, think about driving it, think about how much I love it, think about how great it looks and how good it makes me feel. So that's a payment that I never, ever feel bad about. I do sometimes feel a little bit concerned about how I'm going to make it, but I never feel bad about it coming out. And in 2017, I just talked about insurance. I actually engaged appropriate business insurance. Up until that point, I didn't have any business insurance because I didn't know what I needed. I met my mentor that year. And so one of the things that we talked about was having insurance. And so that's a big cost. So 2017, I operated at about a $6,400 loss. 2018, I had an $8,440 profit. So in 2018, I had won my biggest single contract to date. So a contract that was valued over $6,000. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but up until this point, my contracts had been, say, $3,000 to $4,000. And I'm grateful for all of them. I remember the moment that the clients signed the $6,000 contract. I remember driving home. It was about a 45-minute drive from the client's home to my home. I remember being in the road and talking with a good friend of mine, and I just said, I almost can't believe how easily they signed this contract. They read through it, and all my contracts are clear and concise. This is what I teach in the Profit Power Pack. They're clear and concise. But I would have thought, if it were me, I would have to like go over it piece by piece by piece. And they read through it. Yeah, it looks good. Signed it, away I go. How do we send you the payment? I was dumbfounded. I'm like, I want me more of these kind of clients because this is amazing. In 2018, so now I was bringing greater income in, which in the life of a small business means that you're usually putting it back in to grow. So I redeveloped a new website. The platform that I was on, I had found was kind of harming me on the SEO front. And so I looked into getting a new platform. Well, moving into a new platform, there's new hosting costs. There's, lots of things like that. There's time, which is a huge one. It took me about 2 months to build the website. And I also engaged an SEO team. So I hired a company that I just love out of Toronto to do the SEO for this website. And so again, there is financial investment in that. And in 2018 was really the beginning of this intense personal growth cycle. So if you look at the numbers in my business, it was a loss and then a profit and then a loss and then the profit. And they seem to almost balance out quite interestingly. I'm noticing this right at this moment, that they seem to almost balance out perfectly. So my first year was $4,300 loss, and my second year was nearly a $4,000 profit. My third year was about a $6,400 loss, and my fourth year was an almost $8,500 profit. Right? So these things are starting to really all stack up and come together to say like, wow, okay, well, let's have a good look at this. So as I'm talking with my coach about, I don't know, it was a couple of days ago, I think, we were talking about this, and she knew we have this really fantastic platform that she uses for her coaching clients to check in, and it's over video. And we hadn't really touched base in a couple of weeks. So I'm in this like deep integration mode. All these things are firing. All this stuff is coming up. And I'm clearing through it and moving through it and beginning to get clarity and understanding around it. And she knew that I was really struggling with these numbers. And I think I say to her every time that we speak, I know we're not here to talk about money, but money is what keeps coming up. And I sent her a video about a week ago that I said, I think even though, we're not here to coach about money, even though our focus is not supposed to be about money, I actually think that the reason that money keeps coming up for me, the reason that it's the thing that I really seem to be wrestling with, I believe that there must be a calling around this. There must be something around this money that I need to learn and understand and grow out of so that I can reach my students on that level. And I said, it's just this thought that just keeps, it sort of passes through my mind, sort of like, when a car drives by on the street, just sort of passes through my mind. It never really stays, but I'd seen it go by enough times that I'm like, I wonder. And my coach said, yeah, I believe that in your soul contract, there is something around money. And so it'll be really intriguing to see how it manifests out into your reality. So as I've been looking through all of this and growing through all of this, I have been beginning to pull the meaning that I associated with these numbers away from the numbers and just looking at them as like, wow, okay. So as I'm talking with my coach about this and I'm talking about these numbers, she said, Amy, every new business, the cycle that you're going through is indicative of every new business. In the first 5 years, it's always up and down and up and down. And the difference between the people who stick it out and make it after 5 years and actually begin to make money are usually the people who are willing to weather the storm. They're usually the people who are willing to say, wow, this really freaking sucks right now, but I know where I'm going. I think it's going to be powerful, and so I need to keep going. Most people would look at those numbers and say, I'm out of here. This is not worth it. I'm making way less money than I would in a job, right? And that's something that has been, totally honesty here, has been rolling around my mind. Am I crazy for owning a business? Am I crazy for starting a second business that right now is just costing me money, hasn't brought anything in? Right? Should I just look at getting a job instead of trying to keep moving forward on a path that just sometimes feels so freaking hard that it's like, when is it going to pay off? And to be honest, I can't tell you if you're in the same moment, if you're having that same feeling right now of just like, I've got to be like batshit crazy right now to continue on the path that I'm going. I'm making way less money than I would in even say a minimum wage job. What the hell am I doing? I can't answer that question for you. All I can say to you is that I'm going through that process right now. I'm questioning everything. And in questioning everything, I'm gaining an immense amount of clarity and passion around what's going on. And so I want to talk about for just a moment here. I want to touch on the idea of being, the click-through success person. The idea that you need to have stellar numbers or amazing results or what have you. And so when I look at the numbers in my business, so we just talked about my profits and loss, and I'm just popping across on the other side of my sheet. I have my full 5 years laid out in one big tablet form. So my total income varies greatly from year to year to year. And what I realized all of a sudden today, as I'm looking at this, I finally figured out how to print off a report that had all 5 years on the same page, which was awesome. I looked at last year and I had a total income of just over $32,000. Now, that is like basically a minimum wage job, right? I get it. It's basically a minimum wage job. Here's what I want to talk about what happened last year. So in 2017, I took on a full-time job because my total income from 2017 was just shy of $11,000. And I had come to the point where I'm like, I need to do something to create some income, to generate some money into my life, because I'm really tired of always having my back up against the wall. So I took a job that was related to my field. I was doing visual merchandising, which I really enjoyed for a while. For about 6 months, I really enjoyed it. And then it became a job. And what was happening was that I wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't being valued at what I was doing. Things were starting to go sideways, and I'm like, this is not working for me. So in April of 2018, I decided to pull back from full-time. I was full-time at the moment, so I was balancing both this full-time job and my design business. And what was happening was, at the same time I was full-time, I had this big contract win that I just shared with you, and it became this, there was an enormous rub between the job and the time that I needed for my design business. And the job was not willing to work with me to be able to be, because there was a period of time that I knew I needed to make it work. And when you're starting a new business, there's no guarantee of work, even in a business that you've had for years. There's no guarantee of work coming down the road. And so I was in this moment of like really feeling the rub between the two. And so I made the decision to pull back from full-time in my job to part-time. Now, the difference is, as a full-time employee, I was guaranteed a certain number of hours. As a part-time employee, I was not guaranteed anything. And even though at the moment I just felt like I can't do this anymore, and I'm like, why am I giving all this time away to this job that I hate at this point, that I'm not valued at, that I'm not being, my skills and my knowledge and my ability are not being used to the level at which I have ability, to give. Why am I giving all this away? And it's hurting my design business, when I make more in 1 hour of my design business than I do an entire day at this job. What the hell am I doing? So I pulled back to part-time. And I want you to pay very close attention. So if you're multitasking, come back to me for this very specific point. The moment that I made the decision to pull from full-time back to part-time, I was consumed with fear. I had 2 weeks on the schedule that still had my regular full-time hours, and within about 2 days of my making that decision, sure enough, the next schedule came out. I had 4 hours on the schedule. The following week after that came out, I think I had 6 hours on the schedule. I was absolutely engulfed in fear. My worst fear had come true. I was going to be making barely anything, and now, everything had to come from the design business. And what if I don't have any projects? I don't have anything coming up after this one. I don't have anything scheduled. I'm not going to make any money, and I'm going to be broke, and I'm going to da 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 da. Like, name every fear that you could think of. They all came up at the same time. And for 2 weeks, I was engulfed and overwhelmed in this fear. And when it happened, when I saw all of a sudden that these weeks were going to be exactly what I had feared, I froze and I pulled back. And as I look back at the end of 2018, I looked back over the year and I went, that's the moment that it changed for me. The first 4 months of 2018 were incredible. They were abundant in every way. I had, money just seemed to be flowing easily and readily into my life. Projects were coming in from what seemed like, nowhere. They just showed up. And the moment that I made that decision and I decided to allow myself to sit and reside and fear and have that be my only focus, was completely 100% on this fear, I took the entire trajectory of success that I had set up. In 2017, I had set up this trajectory of success and I thwarted it. And sure enough, that summer was one of the hardest summers I've ever had. Financially, it was a struggle. In my business, it was a challenge. I still had work, but the work that I had wasn't engaging. I wasn't engaged in it. I was, I felt like I was doing a lot of problem solving and I wasn't necessarily doing anything that was really fun or engaging to me. And it was just a struggle. And to top it off, I had some huge hits in my personal life that by the time I reached August, September, I was done. I was like, I've been low in my life before. And that was the moment that I'm like, what the hell? This can't go on this way. And I think I've talked about this before, that in that time, in this dark, dark, dark place, I basically gave up. Guys, I basically gave up. I just went, I don't know anymore. I don't know anymore what I need to do. I seem to be making all the wrong decisions. I can't seem to figure out how to get myself going in the direction that I want to. Everything that I seem to be trying is not working out. And I don't know anymore. And I just threw up my hands. At this point, I was going through the motions. And then a friend of mine called me one Friday afternoon, and I will never forget this phone call. We were talking about her business, and she was launching a new business, and she and I knew each other from our business training days. We had gone through the business training program together, so we've been friends for quite a few years. And she was talking about this one element of her business, and I said, don't hire that person. Let's get together next week because I think I can help you. And we got together the following Monday. We spent 7 hours together talking about her new business, talking about, all these things, whatever. And then I asked her a question that I will never forget. And I said to her, why did you call me on Friday? And she said, I just felt that I had to. And what I've been paying attention to, she said, is that when the universe tells me to do something, I do it. And so I just called you. And I full on started sobbing. I still get misty when I think about it. I full on started sobbing. And she's like, whoa, what just happened? And I said to her, I thought the universe forgot about me. Because I thought I had done everything that I could think of to make things work, and it wasn't working. And I had all these beliefs and all these patterns and habits and things, this junk that I had been bringing in. And when I talk about that pivotal moment in April of 2018, where I decided, I see it now, I decided to live in fear and to put nothing but fear out. When I saw that decision, it changed everything. And over these past 9 months, so when I talk about the importance of, going through, doing the personal work, doing the growth work, getting in and clearing out the junk that we've been carrying, this is why. Because if I look at the numbers in my business, if I look at, what I did in terms of income and profit and loss over the 5 years that I've had my business, the truth is my business probably doesn't look all that dissimilar from other businesses that started the same way, right? I work from home. I have very little overhead cost, and I've been, figuring it all out. I'm in a market that has taken a significant hit to the local economy, which means that there's potentially a smaller piece of the pie. I have been watching other businesses over the 5 years close and people getting jobs because they didn't have enough money to keep going. So to say that I'm still here after 5 years is a huge testament to the fact that, like, A, the universe has conspired to keep me going, and B, that I must be doing something right. So when I look at things like the processes that I teach and show you in the Lost to Launched Academy, the reason that I know they'll work for you is I'm going at this going like, holy crap, if I can continue in business and I can still operate at a profit and do all these things, even though I had these crazy limiting beliefs, even though in every freaking turn of the road, I put roadblocks up, I stopped myself from growing. I chose fear instead of choosing joy, instead of choosing abundance. If I can still continue to do that and the business still operates the way it is, then I know the stuff that I've put in here works. And really, what I need to work on now is me, right? So that's really what I want to talk about today is wherever you are in your business, if you're at the beginning of your business journey, first of all, know that it's going to go up and down. And if we can we just make an agreement right now here, you and me together, to say it's not about having these huge success numbers. Let's let go of this idea that if we haven't made $100,000 in our first 6 months, that we're a total failure. And can we just say for a moment that there are people who may have done that and didn't have any experience or anything before that. But they're few and far between. And there are a whole bunch of things that are in their personal lives that we don't know. Maybe they have investors. Maybe they just happen to be connected to the right people. Maybe they have, like, I can't remember what her name is right now, but there's someone who worked for Oprah for 25 years. And so now she's decided to go on her own. Well, she is on podcasts and TV shows and all these things because she has connections. So even though her business may be brand new and she's killing it in her first 6 months or her first year, she spent 25 years working at a job. And so we have in our society, we've glorified this idea of like, it's going to be an overnight success. It's going to be so awesome. Let's hear about your successes. What I would love to know about is the dark moments in your life. What I would love to know about is what is the stuff that you had to overcome to get there? Because the truth is, any person on the planet can build a successful and profitable business. Any person on the planet. I want you to really hear me on this. James Wedmore, Oprah Winfrey, Marie Forleo, they don't have anything special. Tony Robbins, they don't have anything special that sets them apart that makes them able to build a profitable business that you don't already have. Okay? They don't have anything special that sets them apart in that way. What sets them apart is that they did the work. They did the work. They chose to believe in themselves, to believe in their higher calling, to believe in what they're doing. And they did the inner work to get there. I got an email from James Wedmore the other day. So I subscribed to his podcast and I love his training, so I get his emails. And he talked about the idea that entrepreneurship is an inside job. And in that moment, I needed that reminder because I was in a cycle of doubt and really feeling lost at that moment and struggling. I'll be honest with you guys. I was struggling with the fact that I would spend time in meditation, in reading books that are opening my mind and expanding the opportunities of belief and knowledge. And even though I know in the logical center of my brain that all of this is to my benefit and ultimately to the benefit of you, those of you listening to the podcast, or to my future students, or to the people around me, even though logically I know that, I still was struggling with the fact that I had the time freedom to do this, that shouldn't I be hustling more in my business? Shouldn't I be doing more things to be making me money? Right? Like reading isn't making me money. I'm not getting paid to read a book. And when I read this from James Wedmore, entrepreneurship is an inside job, I remembered it really doesn't matter how many strategies and things I put in place and how much time I just spend slugging it out if I'm not willing to do the inner work. And so right now, in this moment, I know I have the capacity to work really friggin' hard. I know I have the drive to do it. I have the determination to do it. I have the willingness to do it. I know those things. And right now, what I'm being called to is this deep personal growth cycle. I am being called to give myself time to really dig into the nitty-gritty of it, to look into the deep, scary corners of my beliefs and of my life and of everything that I've created and go, okay, what needs to change? How can I grow? How can I expand out of this? And so when I read that entrepreneurship is an inside job, it was literally like, when people are saying like, if you're looking for a sign, this is it. That was my sign that I needed in that day to be able to go, you're not being wasteful of your time, you're not being disrespectful of your time or anybody else's. I was making up all these reasons in my mind, specifically around like my guy who has a job and I know he doesn't super enjoy it, but he goes to it every day, right? He still needs to make money. And I was making all these excuses and reasons and stories up in my mind about what that meant and what my day needed to look like in relation to that. And something that I need to continually remind myself of is that I'm creating a life that I want to live. I've lived the life of having a job. I've lived the life of my time being responsible and accounted for to somebody else. I've lived the life of having a regular paycheck. And while there are moments that I definitely go, boy, having a regular paycheck would be fantastic, I also go, well, I am not excited at all about having my time be accounted for to somebody else, having somebody else direct my ship and tell me how much I can make and the work that I need to do, right? So I know that, I understand that. And so now I need to find a way to release myself from this story that I have been chaining myself to, because when I can commit 100% into this personal growth, into doing the deep work and to allowing it to roll through, then once I can do that, I know that I'm just adding like friggin' rocket fuel into where I'm going. And if I give myself some time now, I'm sure, I know as in the depth of my knowing that it's going to be to my greatest benefit. And so with that, I am now committing into giving myself the time. So this morning, I'll be honest with you guys, it's a Monday and right now it's almost 4:00 in the Monday afternoon. This morning I got up out of bed. I had to have a quiet weekend, which is wonderful. Like I said, I've been in this deep integration cycle. So a lot of stuff has been coming up. Like if you just imagine like continuously junk showing up to be cleared, that's what's been happening the last 2 weeks. And so there's days where I'm like just sobbing and feel like I'm a complete failure and nothing's going right. And then there are days where I'm like, I'm totally friggin' on fire and it's going to be so amazing. And this has been the cycle that I've been in. And so this morning I woke up, this has been my morning. I got up, I had a shower, I had my breakfast, I did my meditation and hardly made it through my meditation. I'm like, I'm just going to lie down and have a nap. And normally I would set an alarm. I'd do like a 20-minute nap. But this morning, for some reason, I'm just like, you know what? I'm not going to set an alarm. I feel like I need some rest, even though like I feel like I haven't really done much this weekend. So I'm not quite sure why I'm so tired. But I'm going to give myself the grace and space to have a rest. I laid down at 9:30. I woke up at 12:30. Do you think that I needed some rest? You're friggin' right, I am. After I had gone to bed, like I'd had a good, I think 8 hours sleep. So if after 8 hours sleep, the first thing that I need to do in the morning is go back and have another 3 hours sleep. And I was out. It wasn't like I was in and out and whatever. I was out for 3 hours. I was in deep sleep. My body needed it. And so those are the things that I now need to be able to say to myself, there's a reason that I need to do these things. And it's okay for me to give myself the grace and space to do them. All right. So I'm going to close this podcast up because I can see on my timer I'm approaching an hour. But I wanted to share this with you I'll be honest, part of it is for myself. I really feel that I am being called forward to really own these numbers, to share the reality of my business with you, and to also let you know that it's not about the glitz and the glam and the big numbers at the end. Okay, so if I look at my total income from when I started to today, I'm just shy of $92,000, which is not bad. I think it's okay. Would I have earned more? over the last few years if I'd had even a full-time minimum wage job, maybe. But in 4 years, 5 years, I'm coming into 5 years, now I have the opportunity to have a business that is going to continue to grow and to create the second business, which I'm so excited about the impact that Dare to Begin is going to have. There's a reason that I feel passionate about the stuff that I put together in Lost to Launched Academy. Yeah, I need to make money. We've talked about that before. I need to earn an income. I want to earn a living. But when I look at the income potential, so here's something I want you to really think about when it comes to your business. When I look at the income potential of Dare to Begin, I know in my heart that Dare to Begin is going to become a multi-million-dollar business. I don't know when. I'm not exactly sure on the how. And what I'm reminding myself constantly is that is not my job. Paige Cole talked about it last week, so I definitely encourage you to listen to it. The when and the how is not your job. But I know that it's going to become a multi-million-dollar business. And here's why that excites me. In order to be a multi-million-dollar business, the impact that I will have will be enormous. When I get excited about the program, when I get excited about like Lost to Launched Academy, let's just talk about that. When I get excited about Lost to Launched Academy, there's a part of me that's excited about the income potential, but what really excites me about it is knowing what it can do for the person going through it. Knowing that what I've put into it can alleviate a huge amount of stress and overwhelm and frustration for someone else. Knowing that because I've built it in the way that I have, in a way that is that builds on itself, that puts a foundation in place, and that puts in place processes that you can grow and that you can use over and over and over again in your business and growing it and building it. Because I've built it that way, I know that I am reducing the Kleenex count of that entrepreneur. That's what really excites me. So hell yeah, I'm excited about owning a multi-million-dollar company. I'm excited about having unlimited financial freedom, of having the opportunity to make big dreams and goals of mine and potentially those around me come true. But what really excites me, what excites me more than the millions of dollars coming in, is the impact that means that I'm having in the world. Because I believe that we're not here just to serve ourselves. We're all here to serve others. And whether that means you're building a multi-million-dollar company or whether it means that you're just building a profitable business that you can support yourself and your family, it doesn't matter. The size of the impact, the actual numerical value, is not what we're after. Because the honest to goodness truth is, if you can change one life, that's as good as changing 10,000 lives. And I know I've heard others talk about this before, but I would gladly give up the 10,000 if it means that I can change the one. But I don't want to give up the one just to go after the 10,000. Does that make sense? I want to focus on the one. I want to be able to say, I've changed a life somewhere on my way. I've done some good. I've made some impact. When I look at, here's how I look at it. When I look at a student that comes into Lost to Launched Academy, they come in, they want to grow a business, whatever the reasons are that are behind that business. It is one person who's come in. They're going through the processes. They're building this business. That one person now has something that brings a sense of fulfillment, that is taking care of them financially. They've built this based on the programs that I've given them, right? That they've learned from me. That person now has more joy and more love and more abundance in their life, which means that everybody that they come into contact with will feel that. So it raises the vibration of the next. Maybe their dream is to build a business that also has a team, which means that this one person, this one life that I have been focused on, that I want to help this one person, now this one person brings in another person or 4 people or 10 people. And now that one person that I served inside the program now is impacting positively more lives. And so what I begin to see is it's that, age-old example of the pebble in the water. It's that ripple effect. It's not just the one ripple of the one person. It's that one person and the impact they have across in their life and in their community. So that's what excites me. That is what excites me. So I could, if I can make a difference in the one life, that one life will easily impact 10,000. All right. All right, guys. This has been a super fun episode for me. I trust that you've enjoyed it. I trust that it's given you some great insight and learning. And I encourage you to join me over on the Instagrams, I Dare to Begin. And just a heads up that Lost to Launched Academy, and I've talked about it a lot in this episode, and talking about this episode is in no ways about selling it, but I am going to let you know right now that I am opening the doors again in September. I'm still working out the details of exactly what that's going to look like and the cost, etc. But just stay tuned. It's going to be opening up in September. And if you want to get on the wait list to join Lost to Launched Academy, then I invite you to go over to daretobegin.net/join. I'm going to put the URL in the show notes as well. And I invite you to sign up for the wait list so you can get first on into the Academy. All right. With that, I wish you a fantastic rest of the day, and I look forward to seeing you on next week's podcast. And like I've said before, if you're listening, I would love it if you just take a screenshot, share it onto your IG stories. Be sure to tag me in it so we can share the love. Until then, I wish you an amazing rest of the week. Bye for now.